along with the pleasure in growing food and eating it, I always like to find better ways of doing what I'm doing in the garden. This is a standard planting hoe. Use it to make a furrow and put the seeds in. But I'm always looking for neater ways to do things. So I use a board sometimes. Just take the edge of it, make a furrow, makes a very nice furrow, sprinkle the seeds in, and I have to put the soil back in over it. Works well, but whenever you find something that works, there's always a better way. So I keep looking around. Went back to the shop and I thought, I'm going to create a tool that does both, makes the furrow and puts the soil back over. So I created the earth zipper out of some used parts. This is an old broken handle. This is a copper plumbing elbow. I took a hacksaw, cut it open, some pliers, and bent it into shape, and I soldered it on the end here. And the idea is that I can draw it through the soil and make a furrow, and then turn it over after I sprinkle the seeds in, and draw it back over and close the furrow up and bury the seeds. Well, again, once you find a solution, keep thinking. You're not there yet. There's another one. I had to use a soldering iron on that, and that's complicated. So I went back to the hardware store, looked around, and I found this little stainless steel towel hook for the bathroom. Again, put it in the vise, took my hacksaw and cut it away, put in a simple wire handle, and now I have one that actually works even better. Draws a nice furrow to put the seed in, sprinkle in the seed, turn it over, and it pulls the soil right back over. Now, this sort of innovation is great for all of us, but especially for people with handicaps or special needs. They may want to make special tools that allow them to do their gardening easier. So whether you've seen it or not, whether it's made now or not, don't let that stop you. Imagine it, make it, and try it out. I'm fascinated with finding garden tools that do the job well and are pleasant for me to use. And at the start of the season, when I'm ready to put in transplants, I reach for a trowel and I start to dig a hole. But right off I notice that that's a strain on my wrist. With the problems of carpal tunnel syndrome and everything today, people are worried about straining their wrist like this. So is there a solution? What if I turn this around? What if I hold it like a dagger? Then there's no strain on my wrist. I can poke it into the soil, make a hole for the transplant. But this trowel is a little long for that job. So I went to the hardware store, got a bricklayer's trowel, cut off the tip, bent the handle back, and made a nice small-scale dagger trowel. No strain on my wrist, makes just the right size hole to put in my seedling. There's a commercial model available that does something else. It puts the handle of the trowel at a right angle like that. So basically I'm holding it just as comfortably, no real stress, pulling to make the hole, putting the seedling in. All three tools do the same job, but these two without stressing a part of my body. Once my seedlings are in there, I want to cultivate them. And a lot of people like these sort of toothed cultivators. You can drag them through the soil and get rid of weeds. But there is one thing to think about with them. They have teeth, and the tendency with a toothed cultivator like this is to push it into the soil just a little too deeply. And if I go close to my seedlings, once they have roots out into the soil, I'm killing their roots. And some of the most important feeder roots are right there in the surface of the soil. So tools like this, although they'll get rid of weeds, may not be the best answer if you want to keep your seedlings growing as well as possible. So let's look into another type of cultivator, one that will skim the surface of the soil. Well, this intends to do that, but unfortunately the blade has been put on at a right angle. And that means really I have to chop with it rather than skim. Now this one's better because the blade has been put on at a nice angle that allows me to draw it through the soil and just get rid of weeds without going down and harming any of the roots of my seedling. But this is designed a little more heavily than I like. It's almost an axe rather than a razor, as if I were trying to get rid of a big weed and I were going to chop it out with this. There's a lot of weight there. I prefer a tool that's been designed to take even more stress off my hand and arm. There's some weight here, but there's a counterweight back here. So this tool balances very nicely on my hand and is not dragging down my wrist. This one drags down my wrist, as you can see, if I try and balance it on my hand. This one also allows me to skim very nicely around the plant. For narrower rows, I just cut the blade down. Also fabricated another design, no real difference, but again I can come in narrower spaces. And since I play around, I put a right handle on this one so I can reach out there with it. Does it work better? Well, no, it's a little too far from what I want to do. But it's the type of thinking that will lead you into finding tools that'll really do the job well for you. Here's another model called a Cape Cod hoe. Allows you to hold your wrist comfortably and go side to side. Unfortunately, it tends to pile up the soil. Not as effective as these other tools. Now, if you do get some big weeds out there, you're going to want to pry them out. And here are a couple of tools that'll do that. This is the standard asparagus knife. You can poke that in and cut off the root of a deep-rooted weed and pry it out. What I really prefer is this small hand fork. It goes in nicely, pushes in easily, and allows me to really pry and get the whole root system of a larger root out. Not hard on you, effective in the garden. That's the best type of tool to have. With Barbara's help, let me show you some more examples.
Eliot and I are different sizes. He's about 5 inches taller than I am, so our draw hoes are made in different sizes.
If we were to exchange tools, the long handle on mine would be awkward for Barbara, and this wouldn't allow me to use it as easily as I normally do.
The ideal height for a draw hoe is just so that it comes to the tip of your nose. So this is just about right.
Now, if you're going to use a chopping hoe like this with the 90-degree blade, you actually want a shorter handle because you're using it more like a mattock, and a long handle would be very awkward. Another popular hoe style is a push-pull hoe, also called a Dutch hoe. And this, you push back and forth in the soil, and it cuts on both blades. I don't use this. I don't think it's as accurate in between rows of vegetables as it could be, but Barbara has one she likes.
This is a modification of the same hoe that Eliot made for me to use in flower gardens, because very often I have to reach way in. So this has a very lightweight handle and a pistol grip here, so that I can actually use this with one hand, even left-handed, and I can reach right in among clumps in a perennial garden, an annual garden. I just love to work with it.
Now, my favorite scuffle hoe is this stirrup hoe that has this action back and forth. It really cuts well with both blades. I don't use it in the soft garden soil because I find a tool like this tends to go too deeply, but it's ideal in the hard path. Keeping weeds out of here, you couldn't have a better tool. Now, if you want to keep your garden soil fluffy, you can take a fork, push it into the soil, rock back on the handle, and you've done the job.
Now there's actually another tool that's designed to just do that job. It's called a broad fork.
Now with this design, with the handles here, you notice that when Barbara uses it, she actually has to move her body back to get out of the way, an extra action. This tool is basically the same tool, does the same job, but it has two handles. So after you push it into the ground, you can move your hands behind you, and it's a much more comfortable and efficient tool to use. Some tools can be well designed and still not work well. This furrowing hoe really has a nice curve to it. You can tell from the fact that it's rusty, it doesn't get used much. And if I were to want to make a furrow to plant potatoes, this is the tool I would most likely use. And I don't need that much of a furrow to put potatoes in. There's a lot easier way to do it.
It's this simple bulb planter. When I plant potatoes, all I do is put the bulb planter in the soil, the depth of the planter, drop in a potato, knock out the soil, make another one a foot down the row, and on. Simplicity itself.
The right tool makes any garden job easier. We've shown you lots of different tools, and now it's time to play a fun little game. What would I do if I were limited to just 3 tools? I'd have to think long and hard, and I'd want to make sure they were good ones. I suspect my first choice would be this strapped manure fork. I could make compost, I could spread compost, I could mix it into the soil, and I could also poke the fork into the soil and do some light loosening of it. That would probably be the first choice. Second choice would be a really nice garden rake like this, but one that's 30 inches wide, because I garden in 30-inch wide beds, and I'd want to get them just as smooth as possible to have a perfect seed bed to put my seeds and little plants into. And my third choice would obviously be a hoe. I could use the edge of it to make a furrow, and then I could use it from then on, cultivating alongside and around my plants to keep the garden weed free. That would just about do it, I think. What would your choice of 3 tools, Barbara?
Well, for landscaping and flower gardening, I guess the ones I'd pick, I'd start with a good sturdy trowel for weeding. I'd have to have something like that. I need something to dig with. So I'd probably take a round point shovel with a long handle for digging holes and also moving earth or stones from one place to another. I'd need a good rake. I'd take an iron rake because I could use it as a lawn rake if I had to, but I need things for smoothing, raking out debris, and grading. And then I'd have to have 4, Eliot.
Uh-oh.
So I can't garden without my good pruners, which I carry around and use constantly. So I gotta have 4.
Well, now if you get 4, I want to add in, let's see, I need to have a spade. I want to have a small transplanting trowel.
No, but we're out of time. So for now, goodbye and good gardening. Bulbs are really fascinating little things. A bulb is actually a storage facility, and inside it is the embryo of the whole plant that's going to grow, plus a little stored food to get it off to a good start. Now, next time you slice through a bulb in the ground, and sooner or later, this happens to every gardener, take a look at what you see inside. Now, this hyacinth bulb has the germ of the whole hyacinth plant inside, and you can even see the outline of a little hyacinth flower there. Now, the reason nature designs bulbs this way is to get them through some tough times. A lot of the places where the spring bulbs we grow are native are either very hot in the summer, like the Mediterranean, or very cold in the winter, like Asia. And by making the plant go dormant, it can get through that time of the year, and then that brief time when the spring warm rains come, it has all that stored food to make a quick showing and then go dormant again. Now, all of this makes it very easy for the gardener, because when bulbs are dormant, they're easy to handle, they're easy to store, and they're easy to ship. I actually buy most of my bulbs mail order. I look for a dealer who's reputable, has a good reputation for storing bulbs in good condition, delivering good-sized ones, and also doesn't gather them from the wild. There's been a lot of that lately, and I try to find someone who makes it pretty clear they don't do that. The bulbs are actually propagated in a bulb nursery. Now, another way to buy bulbs is to go to a garden center or a hardware store or a feed store. The quality can be a little bit uneven, but if they're selling them in those open bins like a supermarket, you can actually go through the bin and pick out the bulbs that look best to you. For instance, if you're looking for daffodils, you might look for a good triple-nosed bulb like this one, or a double-nosed one that'll produce more blossoms. Also, feel it in your hand and see how much it weighs. If it's a good heavy bulb, that means that it's probably not rotten. If it's firm, it means it's not rotten. And also look to see if it has any blemishes, any mildew, any mold. That would be a bad sign. Now, let's say you're looking for crocus bulbs and you find one like this that has some little growth points on it. You might think, ooh, that's a good sign, it's alive. Well, have a little bit more faith that bulbs are alive, even though they may look very dead. I wouldn't buy this one because I don't want it to grow now. I want it to grow next spring after I've planted it. So I'd actually buy one that looks like this with no growth points at all. Now, spring bulbs are planted to come up in the spring, but you plant them in the fall. And last fall, Eliot and I planted a whole bunch of them. Whether I've bought my bulbs by mail or at a garden center, I really like to have everything all set up before I plant. If I have to store them, I'll put them in a cool, dry place. But it's better if I get everything ready, my site picked out, my materials, and plant them right away. Now, where I put my bulbs partly depends on how they're going to look. Now, I'm going to be planting some very small bulbs right now. I don't want to put them way across the lawn where I won't see them. These are such a cheerful first sign of spring that I really want to have them where I'll see them every time I come in and out the door. But I also have to think about where the bulbs would like to grow. Bulbs need well-drained soil, so I'm going to put them in a place where water won't collect and make them rot. They also like to have good sun, so I'm going to put them here in my herb and flower garden where I've just removed some annuals. This is the time I usually like to plant my bulbs. You have a lot of leeway about when you plant in the fall. But if I put them in too soon, they make too much top growth. If I wait too long, the ground will be frozen before they can make some root growth going into the winter, which is very important. Now, when I plant a lot of little bulbs, Rather than plant them one by one, I'll make a shallow depression like this. I want to make sure my soil is good, but in this case, so much compost and good stuff went into this bed that all I'm going to do is put some rock phosphate in there for good root development, and then I'm going to dig it in like this. Planting depth for bulbs is something people get hung up on, but again, you have a lot of leeway. These are about 1 inch high. I'm going to put them 3, the most 4 inches down. And I'm just going to stick them in here in a very casual, informal arrangement. Then I'll cover them up like that. And just pat the soil, and they're ready to go until spring. Now let's see what else we can plant. When we talk about bulbs, we often include corms, rhizomes, tubers. These are all bulb-like organs that function in very much the same way. Now this is a true bulb. It's a hyacinth. Here's another. This is a narcissus. They have a bud inside that then sprouts and roots down at the bottom. This is a corm. It belongs to a gladiolus plant. Also has a root down here, and here the bud sits up on top and then sprouts. This crocus also came from a corm, one corm, which I planted last year, and look how many it's produced along the sides. The central one's probably died. Again, big roots hanging down. This is a rhizome. It's an underground swollen stem, belongs to an iris plant, and it will send up shoots along its length. This is a tuberous plant. The tuberous begonia makes a little fat tuber like this and puts up little tiny pink buds along the sides. Another tuber is this elephant's ear. This huge tuber makes a huge foliage plant in summertime, and it also has buds along the sides. Now sometimes it's the root system that's swollen underground, like in the case of this ranunculus. These little dried out fingers are roots that will swell up and produce beautiful summer flowering plants. Again, a tuberous root on this dahlia plant. It will also send up shoots in the summertime. Now, none of these distinctions are terribly important. They're all underground storage organs that help the plant get through tough times and also make it easier on the gardener. They're easier plants to store and keep while they're dormant. The important thing is to get to know each one, how to grow it, and the best spot to plant it in. These are the little guys we're going to plant. Glory of the snow.
Well, the Latin name is Cyanodoxa gigantea. Must have been named by an optimist. You want me to run get the backhoe?
Very funny. They're going to be very cute. Now, I think what we'll do here is try to pretend that nature is scattering these at random. And we'll just plant them in a little drift like that. And, yeah. All I need to do here is take the trowel, make a little hole, and plant them about 3 inches down, maximum. And bury them one by one. There we go.
You want some compost over that?
Wouldn't hurt. You know, I also think we ought to put some straw over this to protect it. They're very small bulbs planted rather shallowly.
Okay.
And I think the tree would like it too.
There we are.
That'll be a good winter mulch. Now you got to remind me, Eliot, to remove this when it's time for the little bulbs to come up.
Okay.
They won't like coming up through that. And I won't rake that off in the spring. I'll just lightly lift it off like that so I don't damage any that have started to poke their little heads up. Okay, I think we should put some of those all around the tree. What do you think?
I'm with it. Let's go.
One of my favorite things to do with spring bulbs is to naturalize them. And that just means planting them in a nice random way and letting them multiply over the years so it looks like nature did the whole thing. I thought what we do, Eliot, is to plant some of these scilla right here in the lawn.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is how we're going to mow the lawn next spring with bulbs in it.
Oh, that won't be a problem. If it were daffodils, it would be, you're right, because it would take a while for the foliage to wither and you couldn't mow. But with these little scilla, they come so early and they're so short that if we set the mower about 2 or 3 inches, those first few mowings aren't even going to harm the scilla. And after that, they won't even be here.
Great.
I think this is a case where the bulb planter would be a good idea.
This is a wonderful tool. It allows you to take a little divot out.
This is a good system. You make the little holes and I'll drop in some rock phosphate, and then I'll plant the bulb about 4 inches deep. Now, if you've ever wondered which end is up with a bulb, notice that the pointed end is always up, and at the bottom, this basal plate, you can often see a little bit of root that was there last year. That's a good way to tell.
One nice thing about this system is that you can put the grass right back in the hole, just like the divot on the golf course. You never even know you moved it.
And the bulb will come up right through the grass.
How about another one right here? Good.
That's good. Now, like any spring bulb, this is going to reproduce itself by making little babies off the mother bulb at the base here. But the great thing about Scilla is that it also goes to seed really well, and hopefully it's going to self-sow all over this lawn. In about 5 years, maybe we'll have a sea of blue here. Won't that be pretty?
Sounds good.